Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are continuing our coverage of Ahsoka, the new live-action TV show with Erin McGowan, and joining us today, the esteemed Professor Matthew Kapell. We're talking about Ahsoka Season 1, I hope of many seasons, Episode 4. Matthew, so good to have you joining us. For those who haven't heard you before, do you want to give kind of like a quick introduction of yourself and tell us how you've been feeling about Ahsoka so far? Or actually, let me change that question. Give us a quick introduction for yourself and tell us, how did you feel about Ahsoka, the character, kind of going into this show?
That's a nice way of doing it. Yeah. So my name is Matthew Kapell. I'm an anthropologist, a historian, and a mythographer. I just switched places that I teach. So I'm at Montclair State University in the lovely New Jersey. And just right now, for the first time in a really long time, only teaching anthropology, though I'll be teaching classics next semester. So, and I both liked Ahsoka and thought that the love of Ahsoka was overplayed. But in terms of recent Star Wars content, I'm not on the bandwagon for Clone Wars. I don't think it's the best. I think Rebels is the best, or Andor is the best, but it's definitely not Clone Wars, which I find really hit or miss. So I love Ahsoka. She's one of my favorite characters, but she's not the character that I really, truly care about on a day-to-day basis.
Fair. And can you say a bit more about what you mean by overloved? Because I think that's a phrase that could probably be misinterpreted in 8 different ways.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't mean to diss anybody's preference for characters at all. I thought that as before season 7 of Clone Wars was dropped, I thought the ways in which people really cared for the character of Ahsoka were largely about projecting things they wanted Ahsoka to be onto the character, rather than being able to point at the character and go, look, this is when she does it. Which is not to say that there's anything wrong with loving her. Furthermore, there's a lot of character moments in Clone Wars with Ahsoka that are just awesome. When she walks away from the Jedi Order and it's walking away from a group of men who are going, oh, look, we screwed up, come back, is one of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars. So, I mean, she's very much high up there. She's just not as high as she is for a lot of other people, I think, would be another way of putting it. Then again, my favorite Star Wars character in all of Star Wars is Hera Syndulla. So
cool. Okay. Well, we got a lot to talk about with this episode. Also, though, joining us, as I hope was going to be pretty regular for the Ahsoka show, is Erin McGowan, Lady Tano herself. Erin, say hello and kind of jump into the conversation wherever you want.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm back. It's Erin. No, this show has been everything I could have hoped and dreamed for. All I've wanted since I was 7 years old is a show just about Ahsoka, because she's the one that I love the most, because I really identified with her as someone who's around her age. I felt like we grew up together. So I've always wanted to see her in live action. Like, why wouldn't you, when that's like someone you love so much, which, Matthew, we disagree, but that's okay. I respect your opinions, and I understand we grew up in very different eras, and I think that probably has a lot to do with it. But also you're valid in your opinions.
What a nice way of saying
but yeah,
old.
I didn't say it.
No, I have experience with Lady Tano here. If she wants to call one of us old, she will just call us old. She does it quite frequently, so don't worry about that one.
But yeah, the show's been great. This episode, everyone, my friend texted me last night and was like, oh my God. And I just said, I haven't seen the episode yet. And he was like, watch it now. And then I went to bed and he texted me like 10 minutes later, did you watch it? No, I was sleeping. But I watched it this morning. And I just knew everyone was really excited. Like, someone in my, one of my Discord chats for like a Star Wars thing had said like, oh my God, the ending of the episode. And everyone was like, we haven't seen it yet. Shut up. So I kind of knew something big was coming. I was kind of just waiting on that. Wasn't sure where it was going to go. I thought we were just talking about Sabine. We weren't. But But yeah, so that was I was crying at the end of the episode, I will be honest, because it means so much to me. I don't know if I want to throw that spoiler out till we like do an episode breakdown.
Yeah, I think I'm careful. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable saying at this point that we are going to be spoiling the show. Now, this episode's going to be coming out a significant amount of time after Ahsoka episode 4 itself aired. I'm hoping not too much longer, but for those wondering why it's so late, it's because we are respecting the strike. We're recording this now, but we are not going to be. I am not releasing on any of my podcasts media that is directly promoting or talking about the struck media, of which Ahsoka is definitely part of. Disney being not the best right now. But so we're talking about that. So I hope that by the time this comes out, you've either watched the episode or decided not to watch it and you're just listening to us because we want to get filled in. So yeah, we can do spoilers for sure. I have some thoughts on the big thing that happened at the end of the episode. But I want to back up just 1 second and say, Matthew, I'm going to call you Professor because I can be Matthew because that's a good name. We both share that name. But Erin, when you started that, I was like, what did I say? I haven't said anything yet that you're to disagree with. But then I understood who you're referring to. But so distinguished Professor, how have you felt about the show overall going into this episode?
I think my critiques would be the critiques that I've seen online. Mostly, I find it a bit slow. And when it's not slow, it's trying really hard not to be slow in strangely located spots in the narrative. And I'm okay with waiting. But part of me thinks really I should have just waited for the entire season to be done and then binged it with my wife. I think I probably would like it a lot more than I'm liking it. My other issue, which is a stupid issue, I recognize this is a silly issue, but I think the actors are having a difficult time. The actors who are representing formerly animated characters are having a difficult time doing what they want to do under the direction they're getting. So they all seem a little forced, which is not to say that these are bad actors, because we know most of them, and most of them are great actors, but they're trying so hard to hit the right pose that character would hit in a episode of Rebels that it looks like they're having a tough time just being naturally an actor doing a part. And you know, I
think that's really valid.
You know, thank you. And I think Ahsoka only has one thing to do, which is look troubled and intense about it. And I need Ahsoka to have more stuff to feel, to emote about, to laugh and to be joshing, and she needs to do more than just like wander around and look like a Jedi who has worries, right? Because the character of Ahsoka is so much more than that, and we're not getting that. We're just getting generic Jedi number 4.
It is giving broody Bruce Wayne right now.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I like that.
Yeah, I was watching this episode and I thought it was really interesting, and I like the two different perspectives we have, and I think it's important, and I think, like, Matthew, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I also really want to honor that, like, I think there is just something amazing about just seeing this character being in live action, even if it is a little bit of a, you know, not doing as much as we might have thought. And Erin, especially as you talked about, you know, how much that can mean to someone. To me, I was really struck by this, especially though, when, you know, here in episode 4, the main kind of, like, this is the halfway point of the season, and the main, like, will they, won't they moment wasn't Ahsoka's, it was Sabine's. And, like, I'm loving the show for Sabine, and I'm loving the show as Rebels basically season 5. But it's funny because when the Boba Fett show had Mandalorian go off on his own thing, I didn't mind it too much, because in my mind this was all sort of just, you know, there's a show called the post, you know, Fall of the Empire, Life Out on the Rim, and Boba Fett and Bo-Katan, and all these characters are all doing their own thing, and they're all kind of weaving in and out of each other's shows. This one, it is feeling very much like Rebels, and I think it kind of speaks to some of what you're saying, Matthew, about the direction. It definitely feels to me, though, and granted, what we just got at the end, I think, of this episode is going to really start to open it up. But, Erin, I'm really curious your thoughts on, like, what have you felt about seeing the big sort of character movement so far not be more from the Rebels characters, with Ahsoka's character. Ahsoka to me feels very much like she felt in Rebels, where she is the one to provide insight and to provide wisdom and to provide some awesome fighting and to help other characters on their journey, but so far at least not to do much of her own journey.
Yeah, she hasn't had a very forward-moving journey at this point in the show. I'm kind of hoping that that's a little bit on purpose because they have to introduce the Rebels characters to this whole audience who's never seen the cartoon shows.
Right.
And so I feel like to do that justice, it makes sense that they'd put a lot more time and effort into those characters and establishing them, explaining who Ezra is, all of that stuff. So I can understand why they've done it that way. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, she's had very little emotional growth or emotion so far.
Right.
Like, there were a couple moments that I did really appreciate where it's like, you could see a little bit of Padawan Ahsoka. I don't remember. It was in the first episode. I just rewatched the first episode last night with my parents. But there's a moment she's about to fight someone and she just has the tiniest little smirk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, there's snips. Like, she's deep in there, but it's nice to see that she's still there. So I agree. Like, I'd love to see her laugh. And I think with what we got at the end of the episode, she's meeting with Anakin right now. Like, depending how that conversation goes, what they discover, what they work through, like, this could be a 180 for her character. Like, well, it will be. She's not going to come out the same. And so that could be that catalyst of the growth we're kind of all looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that happening, and that's why it's mid-season like that. And maybe, because now it's like, oh, where's Sabine? No one knows, you know? Yeah. And they don't want to give away too much of the bad guy's plans, so they're probably not going to focus on her very much for an episode or two. Is what I'm hoping, which gives us more space with Ahsoka and the new version of her that's going to come out of the world in between worlds or wherever she... Is that where she is right now?
I think so, yeah.
Or is it like space heaven?
We don't know. But yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I will admit, I think I would have been much more negative about this episode if we hadn't seen that at the end. Because part of what it got me thinking about, Matthew, I'm curious where you would be on something like this. Like, I felt this a lot as a pastor, but I've certainly talked to other friends of mine who are teachers or educators or therapists or whatever, where they often have to have their, like, even if they're hanging out with friends, they're still in kind of a professional setting of, like, you all see me in this role, and so I have to be detached. I can't be as broken as some of you. I can't have the emotions that you do. I'm the one who everyone else is looking to be the rock, to be the stability, to be the guide. And so I really crave the part of my life where I get to let all that go, you know, whether it's with my professional colleagues or with my family who doesn't see me that way or whatever it is. And that's what I'm hoping that's what we're going to kind of get. And I felt that even just in the way she said master, you know, to Anakin with a sense of like wonder and what was happening. And I think some apprehension is that this is where we'll get to see like that the Ahsoka she is presenting to everyone else isn't that she is kind of like just cynical and tired of everything. It's that she's very intentionally putting out that front.
Yeah.
Did that make some sense?
I agree with that. Like, the Ahsoka we've seen so far in the live action, and I've talked about this before, how, like, I didn't love her at first. I was like, who is this character? Like, I don't know her. Like, what's happening? But yeah, I agree. It's that she has been so hurt by the world, or the galaxy, I guess, that her coping at this point in her life, and also maybe just what she's learned the best, because, you know, in the first episode, Sabine asks where's home. She's on the ship. She doesn't care. It's her ship, her droid. That's all she wants. That's all she needs. Because then she doesn't have to act all the time when she's just at home, because Huyang doesn't care if she wants to, like, be broody and stay in her room and cry for a while or whatever she's feeling. Because I imagine that's probably, she does that more than she would ever admit, because like you're saying, she's putting out a really brave front. She's feeling all this responsibility from these people who are a little younger than her, newer to the world of like wards, who maybe don't understand things as well as she feels she does. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I agree. I think it's a very maybe self-assigned title of leadership, but also people do look to her.
Right.
So yeah, Basically, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I will agree with Erin on that too. And I think you're right, Matthew, that that notion that you have to be who people expect you to be is at issue. And
Right.
I imagine as a pastor that has happened to you a lot. It's really hard to cut loose when you're the person everybody's looking at to not cut loose. And I will say I have hope as well, because I know that Rosario Dawson and Hayden Christensen went to acting school together. And they've known each other since like 2000. So there's a really good chance that when they're doing their interactions, it's going to be a really good bit of acting from both of them because they're comfortable with each other. And I'm very hopeful that that is the thing that allows us to see Ahsoka as something other than this monolith of worry.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. All right, well, let's give a quick episode summary and kind of catch people up. Because obviously we're talking about Anakin. It's a big part of the episode, but basically the episode continues on sort of three different lines. Line one is our heroes are working with Huyang. They're trying to rebuild the ship. And our heroes being Hera and Ahsoka. Sabine, thank you. Sabine and Ahsoka. They work with Huyang to try and rebuild the ship. They decide to go off while he keeps trying to fix the ship to try and stop. They know they're on the planet where this huge ship is being constructed. They know that something's going to happen, the map that will allow them to go get Thrawn and possibly to go get Ezra, and they want to take the map back and stop them from going. And at one point, Ahsoka says to Sabine, look, as hard as this is, it is important enough that we not let Thrawn come back, that we might have to destroy the means of getting Thrawn back. We might have to destroy the means of getting Ezra back if it also prevents Thrawn coming back. And she sort of says to Sabine, can I count on you to do this? And Sabine says yes, but they never, like, the wording of it is interesting in a way that I think you're kind of immediately like, nope, Sabine is absolutely not going to hold to that, what Ahsoka wants.
She goes, you know you can trust me. That's a lie, Sabine. She doesn't know that. You literally stole the map from her. Like,
yeah, well, we can trust Sabine to do what Sabine thinks is right, no matter whatever the house says. So, yes.
Yeah.
They get in a couple of fights. They fight with Shin and the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor, I think, gets killed, or like they get slashed across the chest, and all this like dust comes out. We'll talk about that in a bit. Seems pretty dead. So probably not Ezra under there, as was speculated by some people. But so the other, let me back up a second. So that's one plot line. The second plot line is the not quite Sith working with Morgan Elsbeth to try and construct this, space ring and find the map and figure out how to get in hyperspace to go to where Thrawn and Ezra are. And then lastly, we have Hera continuing to try and work with the New Republic to get them to support her in stopping this. She gets a pretty hard no. So she winds up with Chopper and with her son taking out the Ghost. They don't have authorization, but who cares? They're going to go and try to join our heroes and see what can be done about all this. And they jump in the Ghost with a bunch of X-Wings, one of which is piloted by Uncle Kim. Forgive me. Appa, forgive me. I really, really love that actor from Kim's Convenience, but no, in this he is Carson, the X-Wing pilot, who's just becoming kind of the Glub Shido of this universe, which I really, really love. So anyway, we get to a big final battle. Shin and Sabine are fighting, while Ahsoka is fighting. I want to call him Baelor, but is that his name? Balen, thank you. And Ahsoka, Sabine is kind of able to defeat Shin, but Shin gets away. There's fighting. The fighting's pretty cool, but I will say it goes on for a while. The end result of it, though, is that Balen defeats Ahsoka and knocks her off a cliff, and she falls to her maybe death. We're not quite sure. And Balen says to Sabine, look, I promise we won't hurt you, and if you give me back the map, because she's kind of holding it and threatening to destroy it, I will go get Thrawn, but you'll go able to get Ezra, and I promise you that we will, what I'm doing is for the greater good. What I'm doing is for the good of all, much to the shock and chagrin of everybody who has never watched anything in the world. Sabine decides to do it, She gives the map to Balen. The X-Wings arrive just in time to watch them jump off to hyperspace. A couple of them are destroyed, but Carson comes through it okay. The Ghost comes through it okay. And we then end with Ahsoka. At first, we kind of see her body like lying at the bottom of that cliff, but then we shift to this kind of like otherworldly. It might be a thing called the World Between Worlds, which was the thing that was established in Rebels. We're not sure, but it's some kind of like, maybe it's just kind of in her mind as her body is healing, but she's in some kind of ethereal, clearly not actually like a physical place, and she is now talking to, not looking like a Force ghost, just looking like a person in this ethereal world, Anakin Skywalker, in the part of Hayden Christensen. Hayden Christensen, thank you. And there the episode ends.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, and we do
the
get
Darth Vader theme.
a little bit of the Darth Vader theme at the very end of Anakin showing up. So yeah, Erin, talk to us about this episode. What'd you love? What'd you not love?
Well, I love the Inquisitors are so funny to me. It's literally like, I don't remember who says it to Iron Man, but it's like, take that away and what are you? Yeah, take your spinny lightsaber away that requires no skill and is just used to intimidate people and doesn't make any sense. She just had to stare at you for a while to plan when she was gonna stab you. Like,
Yeah.
you stupid. All you did was give her time. You're not attacking her. Like, Inquisitors always do this, and I just think it's so funny. It's so stupid. So, like, yeah, I mean, of course she was gonna murk him. Like, I was not surprised at all.
It was just funny to me because there've been this has been happening going all the way back to WandaVision on Marvel, where the week-to-week result, and the fact that these shows on Disney Plus, both Marvel and Star Wars, love mystery boxes and they love like teasing things. All the way back there, people were thinking that, Mephisto was showing up, all this stuff, who's the brother, etc. And it's continuing. And I saw like all over Twitter this week was just nothing but, who is the Inquisitor? Is it this person? Is it this person? Is it this person?
Yeah.
And for it to be just like random Inquisitor who gets, as you said, pretty easily murked, and we get no knowledge of like who they are or what they're up, I was like, well, that was disappointing, but also kind of good for them, for the internet being stop all the speculation nonsense.
Yeah. I was honestly okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, all those theories flying around, I was like, honestly, I hope it's not someone we know. Because that feels overplayed. It's like, please, a new character. Like, of course, we have new characters here. We have Balen, we have Shin. We've got some other people. But, yeah, I didn't really think he would be much. I figured he would die pretty soon because he's just an Inquisitor who hides behind his spinny blade. And yeah, I was kind of okay with him just turning into dust and exploding. It'd be interesting maybe in hindsight to find out, like, when Shin finds out... No, Shin knows he's dead. Never mind. I guess she was the only one that I thought might have a reaction to his death. But she didn't, so don't really think it mattered. I think it was maybe just like a... What do they call it? A red herring?
Yeah.
Where it's like just to get people talking and excited. Who could it be? Nobody cares.
So there is a lot in this episode I liked. There's a lot that I was not a big fan of, and Shin did have a reaction. She just kind of stood and stared.
Yeah.
And there's like these two different shots of Shin from the back, clearly not looking at Ahsoka, who's holding a lightsaber at her, as Shin is just Sabine. And I was just like, I don't know, the direction of some of these lightsaber fights, it's not the kind of thing we normally care about on the show. It's not a big deal, but Matthew, maybe this is what you're talking about. It felt... The first fight between Sabine and Shin felt very clunky and clumsy, but intentionally so. Something about the lightsaber fighting in this episode just all felt off to me. It just, and those moments of like long staring while something is happening in the other fight and no one's doing anything just felt very like, what is happening here?
Matthew, I'm gonna interrupt you both, I guess. Almost shot for shot, the Ahsoka Inquisitor scene is directly from Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. It is almost shot for shot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So those long pauses and staring is and the way they stand with where their swords are, how their swords are being held, straight up Seven Samurai. And the scene in Seven Samurai that it is the main character. I'm not going to remember any Seven Samurai names. Is this great swordsman, and this other swordsman comes up to him and says, "I'm better than you, and I challenge you." And so the samurai has to try to convince him not to actually go through with the challenge because he will lose. So they start out with bokken, which are the wooden swords, which we've seen in Star Wars. And the master samurai beats this guy, and then he goes, "No, then I want to use real swords," and he gets killed. And it is exactly what is happening in that scene, which is why I would say Ahsoka only has one blade lit, because she's not even trying that hard, which is exactly how the samurai in Seven Samurai does it. He's like, "I don't even have to work to defeat you. Please don't go through with this challenge. I'm giving you every opportunity over and over again. Okay, fine. I'll have to kill you," which is a feeling that we also get towards the end of the episode from Balen Skull, when he's like, "Inevitable. I have no choice."
Right.
Yeah, right. So there's this whole thing throughout the episode that's very much from Seven Samurai. So for the listeners, if you've not seen Seven Samurai, the best of the Akira Kurosawa films, you should go see it. Or actually, you should watch it at home, because you can't go see it.
Yeah. It is very good. You should then soon afterwards watch The Magnificent Seven, which is a cowboy remake of it, which is also quite good, even though it has the epitome of the all-American cowboy played by Yul Brynner. But they're both fantastic movies. But yeah, that's a really good point, and then that makes me feel somewhat better about the lightsaber fighting. It was intentional in that kind of a way.
Yeah, like she wasn't even trying. I feel like she was laughing at him.
Right. So yeah, how do we feel about let's kind of go back to Hera's plotline. So it's great to see her and to see Chopper. How are we feeling about how that storyline's playing out?
There's not much to comment on yet. And I hope there will be, because Mary Elizabeth Winstead is really a good actor, and I want to see her do stuff. But the only moment in which we go, "Oh, that's Hera," is when she's like, "So did you just sit on the sidelines and see who was going to come out on top?" moment from the last episode. But otherwise, she's just doing what you'd expect her to do. I think the actual character moment in the Ghost, oh God, I was so happy to see the Ghost, was Jason going, "I have a bad feeling." Yeah, that was significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as a parent, it really sucked. Also, as the person here who's a parent, you're like, "Oh shit, my kid is gonna be in danger."
Yeah. No, I can totally see that, and it's funny. Like, I think I talked about this on the last episode, so I'm not going to go into it too much more. But I'm becoming more and more a fan of bureaucracy, and I think there's something very interesting about the story where the local character says, "Look, you need to put all of our resources into this one specific thing," and the person who has more of the big picture is like, "I wish we could, but we can't." And in most of these movies, they're immediately portrayed as like, "Well, they're wrong, so clearly our hero should just do the right thing." And it's kind of why I love Last Jedi, is because that's the case where it's like, no, Leia actually knew better than Poe. And so I kind of wish that we weren't getting such a cookie cutter, the New Republic is being stupid, Hera knows best, and Hera's going to go off and save the day. But if that's the story we're getting, that's fine, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. And I do love Carson coming along for the ride, too. So that was all pretty fun.
Yeah. I really agree with the professor, as in, we haven't had time to, have anything to say about it. It's been very, like you were saying, cookie cutter. Yeah.
So let's talk then about Sabine. As I said, I think it was fairly predictable, but what'd you all think of kind of her journey and her decision at the end?
Sabine's a piece of shit. That's all I have to say. Mm-hmm. She's old enough. She's been through war. She should know better. But, I don't know. Because also, I understand her feelings, and I can empathize with that. But I really agree with Ahsoka, as in, you have to do what's for the greater good. And I was really hoping Sabine would take that moment to think to herself and say, Ezra would have destroyed this.
Yeah.
And
I
he
wish
would have. Yeah.
He absolutely
Yeah.
would have. That's exactly what he did. He sacrificed everything of his own.
You're right. Yeah, it's doing kind of the exact opposite of what
Mhm.
Ezra did. And it's, yeah, I really don't like the way they took that plot line. A, because it was just so telegraphed, and I wished it was not quite so obvious. In the same way of like the moment Ahsoka falls, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how she's gonna wind up seeing Anakin. But with Sabine, especially because one of the things that they keep pushing is the idea that for Sabine, Ezra is her only family, which makes no sense because at least by the end of Rebels, like, yes, she had strong feelings of family for Ezra and for Hera and for everyone else on the Ghost crew. Granted, Kanan has died. Zeb and Callus are off in very romantic love off on their planet, but they're still around. They could come back for something. I do hope we get a cameo of some of them at some point. Especially since we got Zeb in some other live action thing that now I'm forgetting for a second.
Third season of Mandalorian.
Yeah, so he can come back. Yeah, so this whole idea of like Sabine needing to find Ezra, it doesn't really work for me. And I don't know if they're trying to make it because it's a romantic love, which I really hope they're not doing. But like, how did that strike for you that like she needs him because she has no other family?
Actually, I do have something to say. So I agree with you, as in I'm sitting there like, yo, what about your space mom? The woman who basically raised you. Like, what about Hera? But also, I kind of, just when you were saying now about how, like, why is it Ezra? I feel like it maybe is similar to why I feel the way I do about Ahsoka. Like, they were both young. They both grew up with it together. And so I wonder, like, maybe that's where, like, I can empathize with it more if, like, that's the reasoning. Because it's like, well, this person means more to me than the others because he gets it.
Yeah.
Like, they grew up in hard times too, but, like, not under Imperial rule. Like, that's different.
I could buy that, or I could even buy like a guilt thing of like he's the one we left behind, and I'm a Mandalorian. We never leave one behind.
True.
Like,
yeah.
though there are lots of potential good reasons for Sabine to want to do this. The show just hasn't given us them yet.
Yeah. Professor, any thoughts?
Well, firstly, I would like to say how wonderful I think it is that the youngest person here was the one who called out Sabine's immaturity. Okay, besides that part, the standout moment in every single episode so far for me was also in this episode, and it was the use of the word enemy.
How so?
Jedis don't use words like that. It is every time she says our enemy is, I'm like, okay, that's an absolute. Matthew, the person we're both named after, the Gospel of Matthew, the enemy part in there, you're the pastor, I'm the person without faith. Love your enemies and bless them that curse you, that part. Every time she says they're dealing with their enemy, I'm very concerned about the way that presents them as heroes. But I'm also very much of the opinion that means the end of this series will be, oh my God, Thrawn isn't our enemy. He's the guy who could have helped stop the First Order. And we've destroyed him, and now we can't stop the First Order. I think she has to have a aha moment where she's like, okay, you're not my enemy, and I have to figure out how not to think of people as enemies.
I wonder.
Interesting. Go ahead.
I wonder if that's not something Anakin helps her with.
That's my
what
thought.
He fell into.
Yep, that's exactly what I think.
And maybe he's there as Anakin to say, this didn't work. This was the worst thing I ever could have done, and I'm so ashamed, and I need you to not do the same. And I think she would really listen to him.
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me sound like a Sith here. I think it's good to have enemies. And Matt, this kind of goes back to the conversation you and I had on superhero ethics about mythology and the American monomyth. I think there's a real danger. I think with the idea of when someone becomes your enemy, they are now dehumanized or desentientized, maybe it's the better way to say it in the Star Wars universe, and therefore, like, you stop seeing their humanity, their sentience, their personhood. Totally with you. But I think part of the reason the Jedi fell is that they weren't willing to name the fact that there was enemies out there, that there was a real danger. And so to me, Ahsoka saying that is kind of like, yes, there is a sense of, I mean, she's gone through all this war, she's gone through all this pain, and that's a problem. But at least part of the idea that I've gotten, both in the movies and shows, but especially in the books, is that the New Republic right now is so focused on not being willing to recognize that there are new enemies forming. And we kind of talked about this when we talked about season 1 of Resistance, that they don't see the First Order coming. And so I think there could be an interesting story there of Thrawn being a bit of an anti-hero, and there's a kind of like, he's really trying to help us stop the First Order or something like that. And that could be interesting, although that's going to start all sorts of debates about Thrawn, because I'm very much, and he's much more of a villain than some of the fans like to think. But I have to say, if the whole point of it is Ahsoka's wrong to think in terms of enemies, I'm very open to that being a very interesting philosophical story. It's a point that, at least as I hear it now, I would very strongly disagree with.
Hey, I think it's cool that we disagree on something, Matthew.
Yeah.
But she's talking like Anakin talked at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. And we know that's the problem. So something has to give way. Now, I will agree with you that too often we get interesting villains, and because they're interesting villains, we want to make them anti-heroes instead of villains. And Thrawn is definitely that. So is Balen Skull, by the way. He's like literally the best, but literally the best. Do the wrong thing. Help me save your friend. Help me reunite you with your friend. Do the wrong thing. It's much better than Palpatine ever does with Anakin. It is much better. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Erin.
There was a moment, I don't remember exactly what was happening. I think he was asking her to hand it to him, maybe. And I really thought he was going to be like, do it. And I wanted it so bad.
That would have been amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've always thought that, like, Palpatine, every time Palpatine tries to, like, give in to your hate, where he's like, come, fall into this trap, it never works.
Yeah.
But when he is like, no, help me, Anakin, that's when it works. Like, Palpatine's really bad at manipulating people, at least as we see on screen. We know he's good at it otherwise, but yeah, Balen's much better. And here's, I guess, what is, I think, my biggest complaint about the show so far. And to some extent, this is also marketing, where I think, like, if I didn't know Thrawn was coming, if I didn't know Ezra was coming, and or as you were saying, Matt, if you were saying, Herr Professor, that we just watch all these episodes together at the same time, which I generally prefer. I was so excited for Thrawn, and we're halfway through the show and we haven't seen him. We're halfway through the show and we haven't seen Ezra. We're halfway through the show and we know almost nothing about Balen and why he wants this, or Morgan Elsbeth and why he wants this.
We're halfway through the show and we haven't seen much of anything. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I was expecting this to be similar to Obi-Wan Kenobi, just like a standalone show, probably similar to what Book of Boba Fett is going to be. But yeah, like, you're right. Like, there's stuff happening. But personally, I wouldn't have assigned the word slow to this show. But you guys are right. Like, there's not much happening so far. And I wonder, what if that shot of Thrawn that they showed us in the trailer, what if that's it? What if that's the end of the show, is Thrawn turning around, goes to credits, season 2, 3 years from now? Like, they absolutely could do that. I hope they don't, but they absolutely could.
And that'd be the kind of thing where if we knew nothing about it, that would be and here's where, like, I think we should be able to talk about, things that we watch, the art that we watch, movies, TV shows, books, etc., separate from the marketing. But here it's difficult, because I think if they did that without ever mentioning anything about who Thrawn was going to be, brilliant, perfect moment. But after making a big deal of announcing his casting, like, that would just be like, if I was the writer and director, if I'd written that, I'd be so mad that we already spoiled who was cast as him,
That's very true. Yeah. It wouldn't necessarily be a great storytelling thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain
Like,
extent,
it could be great.
to
Yeah,
a certain to a certain extent, it's having the same problem that all of the Disney Star Wars shows have, which is, except for The Mandalorian, which is it doesn't understand what episodic TV is very well. And that's always, I mean, if you're going to give me a 2-hour story but make it 7 hours long, I'm going to be upset with you.
Yeah.
I just am. And I don't, and we all three of us definitely know Dave Filoni is better than that. So either it's going to get really good and then end, or he really had to like bend over backwards to meet studio expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that they don't know how to do episodic television. I would probably phrase it as they're consciously choosing not to on a network that is still dumb enough to give it to us episodically. But that's because, like, ever since Marvel Netflix, I have been like, serialized storytelling is just so much better. Like, just drop it all at once. Like, I think that's a whole other debate. I know some people love the episodic; they love waiting week to week. But to me, that's not a fault of the show. It's a fault of the medium that's being shown in.
I think you're both super right about this, because like people had so much trash to talk about season 3 of The Mandalorian because it felt slow. And like you guys are saying, if you binged it all, it would all come together much quickly. You'd probably enjoy it a lot more. Yeah. And so yeah, I think you're right. Like they're screwing themselves over by not releasing things season by season, because that'll get people more excited who aren't like hardcore fans, because of course hardcore fans are gonna wait every week. They're so excited, they're gonna talk about it on Reddit with all their friends for the weeks in between. Like, it's gonna get a lot of buzz going. But yeah, maybe someone who hasn't really watched a Star Wars show before, they're like, I don't know, maybe I'll give it a try. 2 episodes in, they're like, I don't care. Like,
you know what, all of this has led me to a thought that I'm sure no one has thought before, but I'm just gonna put it out there because I think it is unique and new. Capitalism is bad for art.
No way.
If we had no profit motive, art would be better. Radical idea. There it is.
Radical indeed.
Professor, have you ever read anyone say that anywhere?
I think capitalism is good for art, as much as I hate to say it. So, because I don't think art gets made. I don't think art gets made without people hoping to make money from it, who are just the suits. And in this case, we know the suits are the Sith. But if it was just no profit motive and just Dave Filoni wanting to make this, I don't think it would get made. Now I will I will go totally back to the. There's an old quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, the science fiction writer, who said, capitalism seems inevitable right now, but 3 centuries ago, so did the divine right of kings. And it's true. There's got to be something after capitalism, because capitalism is killing us. But
I'm just saying the BBC gave us some great television without a profit motive. But yeah, this is a whole other debate for a whole other time.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind BBC version of Star Wars, but I do like the good effects, and I remember the original Doctor Who effects. So
that's fair. That is very fair. All right. Well. Now that I've gone off on my economic rant and the professor's helped pull me back to earth a bit, any other last things you want to say about this episode? Oh, what are we talking about? Well, let me do that again because we haven't talked about the biggest thing. All right, well, now that I've gone off my little economic rant and, the professor's pulled me back, because there is a big thing we still should be talking about. So what do we think of the end? And where is Ahsoka and what's going on? What do you think?
I think she's in the world between worlds, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think the slight deep fake on Hayden Christensen was a little painful, but I understand their motive. It wasn't as bad as the Luke one. But yeah, I'm so excited. Like, seeing those 2 characters, I'm going to start crying. Oh my God. It meant so much to me. As someone who grew up on the Clone Wars, like, ugh. Because, like, growing up in that way, never seeing Revenge of the Sith. I watched the Clone Wars before seeing Revenge of the Sith. So I knew what happened to Anakin. I knew he was Vader because of the original trilogy. But
Right.
I still got to fall in love with like Anakin Skywalker and see him as this really fun guy before all this bad stuff happened. I got to see the reasoning the bad things started happening. Even if it was assigned post release or whatever you would call it. So it's a really big moment for me seeing like two characters who are so important in live action. And like as someone, oh my god, I'm so emotional because I'm overly tired. So sorry guys, but like seeing Ahsoka have this moment, like as someone who loves the character and like loves the character of Anakin, like I know she's been in so much pain for so many years, and this is gonna be so healing for her, and it's gonna mean so much. So I'm very excited for where the rest of the season is gonna go. I really hope that Anakin's appearance and whatever transpires afterwards makes a big change in the show, and I think that it will.
Erin, your emotions are just perfect and beautiful here. Just to make sure that that is there. Our love for characters is probably one of the most important things that makes us human. So I'm really hoping you never apologize for your emotions again. That said, the question I was going to interrupt you and ask was how you feel about the prequel trilogy. But having seen Clone Wars before Revenge of the Sith, that is interesting. So how do you feel about the prequels series in regards to what we're seeing on Ahsoka right now? Can this be Clone Wars Anakin, or does it have to be like he's dead Anakin completely? Like Force Ghosts, the Force Ghosts are not very interesting.
Yeah.
They drop plot and then go away.
Yes, very true. They're not very deep characters. Yeah, so the prequels, I know it's controversial, but I love Attack of the Clones. Fight me, okay? I love the Geonosian Arena. I loved playing that in the Lego Star Wars game. One of my favorites. And I mean, even Phantom Menace, even now I watch it, and because I was so young when it came out, I was like, I want to be in a pod racer. Like, I know no adult thought that because it was a stupid plot point, but I was hype, and it still gets me excited. So yeah, like, I have a lot of love for the prequels. I will be honest, I think I've only seen Revenge of the Sith once, maybe twice, because that's how painful it is for me. To see what I know is like, oh, I'm emotional again, but to see what I know is Clone Wars Anakin, have that happen, like, even though romance is not written well in the Clone Wars, like, I was young enough to not notice and really believe in the love that Padme and Anakin had. And so that was a hard part too. And I'm really hoping, I hadn't even thought of it, maybe what they throw on screen right now is prequels Anakin, and I hope not. I hope with all the show is taking cartoon into live action. Yeah. So if they present Anakin to us without taking into account who he is during the Clone Wars, I'll be really disappointed.
Yeah, it's, first of all, again, I just want to honor how emotional it is for you. It does not hit me in quite the same way, but I definitely teared up when it was Anakin appearing on screen because of all that. Because I've been so, to me, the thing that has haunted me this whole time and that I've so been desperately to see, and I think now I'm kind of accepting that we'll just never actually see it, but we'll see something similar, is that moment when Ahsoka realizes that Anakin won in the end, that Anakin did defeat Darth Vader at the very end and came back. And so I agree with you. I think it has to be that. And like the little Force notes at the end tell me that there's going to be something there as well. And it makes me really curious. Like, it partly makes me wonder, like, is this in her head that this is all occurring? Or is this a Force ghost? Or is this world, what? And I hope at some point they answer that for us to some extent, because yeah, to me, that's what I need more than anything else, is I need Ahsoka to have a chance to get closure on all of that. And part of that is the pain. Part of that is she has very legitimate anger. You were my master. You fell. How could you do this to me? How could you betray all the things you taught me? But also is we know she carries around so much guilt that she wasn't there for him. and that the part of her that felt that maybe he wouldn't have fallen if she had been there. And it's that, like, I think it's easy to sit back and go, oh, Ahsoka, you shouldn't feel that way, but that never doesn't work, and so just they have so much they need to say to each other, and I'm really looking forward to that. And it's funny because part of the journey I think that I've gone with this is, in some ways, Erin, I hate how painful it was for you, and I can understand why it's not something you want to watch again. But I'm also so jealous that you got to watch Revenge of the Sith like that, because I think, like, to me, I've come to appreciate the prequels a lot more, in part from talking to folks like you and others who really loved them at the time, but also because of Clone Wars, because I think Natalie Portman, and now I'll even say Hayden Christensen, I think are great actors. I think something about the dialogue and the direction, I never felt an iota of chemistry between those two on screen, but I absolutely believed the romance in the Clone Wars animated show, and I absolutely believed, watching like that chilling moment when Obi-Wan and Satine are not sure what to do about this separatist person they've captured, and Anakin just kills the guy, and you hear a little bit of the Emperor, the dark side music, and like all of that was so well done and makes me believe Revenge of the Sith so much more. Even if I still think Mace Windu should have never done a huge wind up on his swing, that was really dumb. But putting that aside, and I think Obi-Wan is not my favorite show by any means, but I will say Obi-Wan convinced me that it's okay for Hayden to keep playing this character, because I loved Matt Latner, who was the voice actor for him. I think he was just so much better. And I kind of think mostly it's probably just bad direction in those original movies and bad writing. And so I like, obviously by this point, there's no way they're going to give us Matt Latner with live action. Like, it just wouldn't work. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm really excited to see where it goes with Hayden. I definitely have some nervousness. I think that there's, I don't want them to undo what's happened in other movies. And so I have a lot of concern, I have a lot of nervousness, but I'm definitely really excited to see where it happens. And I think that this is really the part of Ahsoka's story I think that we're all wanting to see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add on the Hayden Christensen thing. He actually has been in stuff and been really good at it. He was in a film called Shattered Glass about a journalist who was making up his stories and got caught. And he is utterly fantastic in it. It's a small independent film from like 2003, but he just nails the role. Oh, and Rosario Dawson is in that movie too. So, but cool. He is capable of actually being an effective actor, which is not something we can say about a lot of people in Star Wars, right? There are a lot of really bad actors. I'm not going to name any because that would be mean, but there are whole shows that I don't like because the acting was bad. And that doesn't have to be Hayden Christensen. I think he can actually pull this off if he's got the right direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, to me, the best argument for Hayden Christensen's acting in the prequels is Natalie Portman's, because we know that she is a world-class actress. And she's appallingly bad in the prequels, and it's because the writing and the direction are so bad. So, anyway, we're not here to bash on that, but no, I think it's a really good question. I'm glad we're into it. And so I guess maybe I'll kind of turn it back to, Erin, what do you think that dark side music at the end meant?
That is an interesting question.
You have to be who you are. You can't escape your past.
Yeah. That could definitely be it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, when you said that question, the first thing my mind thought was, like, oh, maybe they're foreshadowing. Like, it's not fully Anakin. Like, he's still...
Yeah.
But that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? It doesn't make sense. That's not how the character works. Like...
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think maybe they just threw it in there to be cool. To be like, oh, like, here's Vader, but... What the professor just said makes a lot of sense. You can't run from your past. It's still part of you even when you've reformed.
Yeah. So here's my weird theory, and this might be far too esoteric and far too much of a deep cut. But what happened at the end of Return of the Jedi is that... let me back that up. So in Revenge of the Sith, what Anakin wants more than anything else is to protect the life of his family, of his wife and his unborn children. And for that, he's willing to throw out any principles, the organization he's a part of, in order to protect the life of his family. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader, in order to protect the life of a member of his family, throws out everything he believes and everything he's been a part of. I wonder if, like, again, there's all sorts of stuff about, like, is Anakin fully redeemed by one action? And that's a whole other story. And I'm definitely on the, like, one action is not redemption, but it's part of a journey, et cetera, et cetera. But and this might be a whole other thing that would be way too esoteric and philosophical to get into. But I wonder if there's going to be something there that Anakin is still kind of a trouble. Like, the decision he makes at the end is still the very personal, I am attached to my son. I want to save the life of my son. I can fight my way through the Emperor's mind control. I'm willing to sacrifice myself, which is very much not dark side. But when Vader does that, it's not because I don't think he thinks the Empire is wrong and has to be stopped. It's because he just wants to save his son. So, what do y'all think?
I think that's super true. And it's incredibly Anakin. Like, his problem was always that he cared too much. Too much, quote, quote, in the Jedi's eyes. He cared as much as any human being would. And so I think that's very true. Personally, I always thought, he killed the Emperor, he's back. You know? Mm-hmm. Because also when I saw these movies, the original trilogy, I was so young. Like, the world is that black and white.
Yeah.
Oh, they did something, now they're better. Oh, his Sith eyes are gone. He's fully reformed. We can forgive it all. Well, we can't forgive it because it happened, but we can't blame it on this version of him. Like, that's how black and white it had been in my eyes for a long time. And since I never really sit around and think about it too much, I don't come up with these other ideas, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's hard as a... I don't want to put it precisely this way, but I'm going to anyway. It's very much a story of, like, okay, Hermann Göring is okay now because he saved a dozen Jews. No, he still did the Holocaust. There is no redemption for Vader. There just is no redemption. There can't be. He has committed genocide and child murder. And so the question is that a completely different person? Is Anakin coming back a overwrite of the hardware, essentially? Because if that's the case, then I'm okay with Anakin. But otherwise, I'm like, dude, you don't get any points from me for saving one person after what you've done.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yeah.
One thing for me, have you guys read, well, I think you have, Matthew, but Professor, have you read the book, The Dark Disciple?
No, it's sitting right on my bedside, but no.
Okay. Very good book. I won't really spoil much, but there is a character who we see go from good to evil. And it does seem to be very much a light switch, very much like you're saying, kind of like a hardware reset. Because once he starts to move past it, it's like, oh, the Sith eyes are gone. He's damaged, but he's back. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I had always seen Anakin, as like, oh, this is a different person. Like, the real Anakin never would have thought or done these things until he was corrupted by the Sith. Like, the dark side to me is an overwrite of who you are.
Right.
And that's how
I've always seen it.
And that's how Vader talks about Anakin. He was weak, I destroyed him. He doesn't talk about Anakin as though Anakin was who he was in the past. That is exactly how Vader talks about him. So,
yeah, I think it's really interesting questions, because I admit I didn't see it as purely black and white, but I did see the gray of, like, that Anakin came back at the end, in that, you know, he could overwrite that programming because he was still in there sometime. But also now I'm putting out this idea that maybe he was still being selfish, just, you know, kind of, because certainly at the end of Empire, he's already talking about overthrowing the Emperor with Luke at his side, you know, which is very much the Sith thing, but of, like, the constant infighting among them. So, yeah, I'm gonna try and I try not to have any kind of, like, I want it to go this way or this way, but I think I think if they're willing to really dive into this grayness, there could really be something there of Anakin helping Ahsoka, but also Ahsoka helping Force Ghost Anakin or whatever this entity of Anakin is. You know, because certainly we've seen, yeah, it's. I sense that we're gonna have a lot more to say about this topic before the end of the show. This is about probably where all I can say.
Agreed.
I hope so.
Yeah. Any other last comments either one you want to make about this episode before we wrap up and go into a quick Patreon section?
I will just add that Ray Stevenson is the best thing in this show, and it's a sad thing to have to say that, considering. But he's the one who has the gravitas.
I didn't hear the first part. What is the best part you said?
Ray Stevenson.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. The actor playing Baelor, who has now passed away. Yeah, he's really good. And I think that's enough. I think I just don't like mystery boxes as much as I used to, and so I don't want to make that a critique of the show. That may be my own personal thing, but I'm very frustrated that we still know so little about who he and Shin are and what they want and where they come from.
My critique of the show is it's essentially a fetch quest.
I don't know if you guys had this, but there was a moment in the episode where he mentions that he knew Anakin, and I'm like, oh my god, this conversation's gonna get so good. And Ahsoka turns on her lightsaber and says, but I'm not here to talk about the past. I literally yelled at the screen, turn off your lightsaber, talk about the past, please. But instead they went into a fight. And I was very disappointed.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, when he said that, I thought to myself, he probably has never met Anakin. He's just trying to get to her.
That's possible.
He just knows what he knows. You know? Like he said, everyone in the Order knew of Anakin Skywalker. It doesn't mean you actually met him or knew anything about him. He was the chosen one. Everyone's heard all these crazy tales about him. Everyone knows who his Padawan, who his master is, you know?
Right. But even just that, I think it would have been, yeah, like Anakin's the coolest kid in school and everyone's heard of him and he hasn't heard of them. Mm-hmm. But even just hearing like what some other young Padawan, or probably not even a Padawan, what some other young Jedi thought of Anakin. Like, I would have loved that.
Very true.
All right, Matthew, or Erin, any last thing you want to say before we wrap up?
Just this episode and rewatching the first episode has really solidified my deep-seated need to cosplay Shin Hati. She's so cool. She's so cool. She's so cool. Like, I love a villain who doesn't blink, shows almost no fear, is definitely still a newbie. It's like, you can tell this person doesn't know what they're doing, but they're using overconfidence to compensate. And I love that. She's always smiling. Girl, you don't know you're going to win. You're just pretending you know. You're going to do your best, you know? So, yeah, I would just love to cosplay her.
You would do amazing as her. I've loved seeing how popular she's gotten. I spent a lot of time on queer TikTok and Twitter, and the amount of sapphic love that is being put out there between Sabine and Shin of like, you know, stop fighting and just kiss already is a very, very popular meme that I am all the way here for. So yeah, no, would love to see that. Well, which is a very good segue for those who want to see the cosplay you are currently doing, which we're going to talk a little bit more in our bonus section. We're going to talk about cosplay and Dragon Con with Erin and Matthew. But Erin, for those who are not members, not Patreon section anymore, it's membership, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I am on TikTok and Instagram at Lady Tano Creates, all one word. As you can kind of intuit by the name of my account, I cosplay Ahsoka. Her season 7 version is what I have right now. In the future, of course, I'd love to do more versions of Ahsoka, but I don't quite have the time or money to do as much as with cosplay as I'd love to. But yeah, so if you want to see me do that, I post pictures. Instagram is mostly like pictures of big things or photo shoots I've done and things like that. And then my TikTok, I post a lot of videos of just step-by-step what I'm working on.
Yeah, it's awesome to see. I know nothing about cosplay. I've learned so much of your stuff. Really worth checking out. And Professor Matthew, besides enrolling as a student in Montclair State, which I think is a very good way to do, learn more about your thoughts, what else can people do to find what you have to say out there?
Well, right now, I'm just the old guy who edits a book series and teaches, and I'm very happy with my semi-retired life. So if you're interested in my work, I did do a book on Star Wars a long time ago. As an academic, it's an academic book. But I also edit a game series called Studies in Gaming, which is about tabletop and digital games and how how academics look at them. And you can just find that by Googling my name and studies in gaming, and it'll come right the heck up.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out both of those things. Of course, we're going to have a little bit more of both of them in the membership section, but for everybody else, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We have spoken.